The night Kofi's own blood turned against him, Akosua stood between them, with her bare hands raised, her wrapper torn at the hem from running through the village paths in darkness. The firelight caught the fear in her eyes, but her voice did not shake. "You will not take him," she said to the crowd of men who had come with machetes and torches, their faces twisted with rage. "He is innocent. I know he is innocent." Behind her, the man she loved stood silent. Kofi did not reach out to touch her shoulder. He did not step forward to stand beside her. He simply waited, his body still as a carved wooden post, while Akosua's voice grew louder, more desperate. His own brother accuses him only because he envies him. Because Kofi has what he does not. Because... She paused, searching the faces of the villagers, looking for someone, anyone, who would believe her. The women at the edge of the crowd shifted their weight. The elders exchanged glances. But it was Kofi's mother who broke the silence, her voice thin as wind through dry grass. "My younger son speaks only truth. Kofi stole from the merchant's house. He took the bronze chest, the silk cloths, the silver coins. He is a thief and a liar, and I have raised a son of shame." Akosua's hands fell to her sides. Behind her, she heard Kofi exhale slowly. It was the exhale of a man who had been waiting for permission to breathe again. Akosua's body was as strong as palm fiber rope, built for work, built for survival, not built for beauty. Her skin was dark as wet earth after rain, and her hands were scarred from years of weaving cloth on her wooden loom. The calluses on her palms were so thick that other women joked she could touch fire without feeling pain. She lived at the edge of the settlement of Kibwe, in a small compound she had inherited from her grandmother, a woman who had been known as the fiercest trader in 3 villages. The villagers had never whispered about Akosua the way they whispered about other women. They did not measure her worth by the softness of her skin or the slenderness of her waist. Instead, they came to her when they needed help, when their children burned with fever, when their marriages cracked with doubt, when they faced decisions that threatened to destroy them. Akosua listened. Akosua thought. Akosua spoke wisdom that seemed to arrive from somewhere deeper than her own mind. "That woman sees what others cannot," the healer said. "She sees the true heart of a person." It was not magic, exactly. It was something rarer, the ability to watch a man's eyes when he thought no one was looking, to hear the tremor in a voice that meant deception, to sense the moment when someone was about to break. This gift had made her powerful in ways that wealth could not purchase, but it had also made her lonely. Men did not come to her with love songs, they came with problems. By the time she was 25 harvests old, Akosua had learned that being necessary to people did not make you precious to them. It made you useful. And usefulness was never quite the same as being loved. Then Kofi came to her on the evening when the rains had just ended, when the air still held the metallic taste of storm. He was the oldest son of a merchant family, a man whose father traded cloth and spices across 3 regions. Kofi's voice was smooth as honey, and his eyes held a sadness that seemed too deep for a man of his station. "They want me to marry for business," he told her, sitting on her woven mat as the lamp flickered between them. "A girl whose father has wealth but no character. Her hands are soft, but her heart is hard. I will go mad if I must lie beside her every night." Akosua listened. She always listened. "Why do you tell me this?" she asked quietly, though her gift was already whispering to her that she should not encourage him to speak further. "Because you see people truly," Kofi said. "And I need someone who sees me, not the merchant's son, not the man with possibilities, just me." He visited her compound many times after that night. He would come when the sun was setting, when the dust from the day's work had settled and the village was quiet. They would sit together, and he would talk about his frustrations, his fears, his dreams of being something other than what his family demanded. Akosua would listen, and slowly, without meaning to, she began to love him. The moment she understood her own heart, she also understood it was breaking. But she said nothing. She simply made room for him in her life, in her time, in the careful space she had built for herself, away from the cruelty of other people's judgment. Within 2 cycles of the moon, all the settlement of Kibwe knew that Kofi was visiting Akosua's compound. Within 4 cycles, his family had heard the rumors and sent his mother to investigate. His mother came in the afternoon, when Akosua was at the river gathering water. The other women saw her approach Akosua's compound, saw her peer through the entrance, saw her touch the wooden door frame with one finger, as if it might contaminate her. When Akosua returned, clay pot balanced on her head, dripping river water onto her feet. The women at the water's edge were already murmuring. "His family will never allow it," they whispered. "She is too old. She has no dowry. She is not beautiful enough to justify a merchant's son choosing her." But Kofi did not listen to his family's objections. Instead, he made a public declaration at the market, his voice carrying over the noise of traders and buyers. "I choose Akosua," he said. "I will marry her, and I will not marry the girl my father selected." The elders were shocked. The young women were scandalized. But the older women, the ones who had sought Akosua's counsel, nodded slowly. "She has the sight," they said. "She sees what we cannot. Perhaps she has seen that he is a good man, even if his family is not good to him." The wedding happened in the rainy season. Akosua wore a wrapper dyed with indigo, and Kofi wore cloth that his father had reluctantly provided. They were married under the great tree at the center of the village, and for the first time in her life, Akosua believed that her gift of sight had also given her something precious, a man who chose her not for her beauty, but for her understanding. They lived in a new compound that Kofi's father reluctantly built for them, just far enough from his main house to suggest that his son had disappointed him, but close enough to remind them both of the family they had defied. Akosua's loom was moved into their shared space, and Kofi would sit nearby in the evenings, watching her fingers move with precision through the threads, creating patterns that seemed to hold meaning. Diamonds crossing diamonds, lines speaking to lines. "I am happy because you chose to see me," he would say, and Akosua's hands would falter briefly on the loom before she continued, because already, her gift was whispering something she did not want to hear. 3 months after their wedding, Kofi's younger brother came to their compound in darkness. Akosua was asleep, and she woke to the sound of men's voices rising in argument outside her window. She lit the lamp and wrapped her cloth around her waist, her heart already moving fast because she could feel the wrongness in the air, the way a bird can feel the coming of a storm. "You took it!" Kofi's brother was shouting. "You took the merchant's bronze chest, the one father had set aside for my bride price. You stole from our father's house." Through the darkness, Akosua heard Kofi's voice, calm and steady. "I did no such thing. You know this. You have always envied me because our father loves me more than he loves you." "You lie!" The words came like a whip. "You have always lied. You always had the softer voice, the gentler face. Everyone always believed you. But you are a thief. You are a thief and a liar, and this time, your tricks will not work." Akosua pushed out through the entrance of their compound. In the moonlight, she could see both brothers clearly. Kofi stood with his arms at his sides, his face a mask of calm. His brother's face was twisted with something worse than anger. It was twisted with truth that had festered into poison. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through their argument. "My brother has accused him of theft," Kofi said quietly. "He has accused me before our father and before the elders. He says I stole a bronze chest and goods from our father's merchant house." Akosua's gift rose in her like heat from a fire. She could see the truth in this moment. She could see it in the way Kofi's jaw was clenched, in the way his breath came too slowly, in the way his eyes were fixed on a point beyond his brother's face. She could see it in the tremor in his brother's voice, in the sweat on his palms, in the desperate righteousness that only a person speaking truth can carry. But she looked at Kofi's face, at the man she had chosen, the man who had chosen her, and she made a decision that would change everything. "You are lying," she said to Kofi's brother, her voice steady and clear. "I know your heart. I have heard you speak of your jealousy 100 times. You have envied your brother since childhood because he is smarter than you, because people love him more than they love you. This is a false accusation born from poison in your spirit." The brother stepped backward, shock crossing his face. "You do not know. I know," Akosua interrupted. "I know that you are trying to destroy him because you cannot bear to see him happy with someone who loves him truly. You want him shamed so that he will be ashamed too. But I will not let that happen. Not while I live." She stepped between them, her wrapper fluttering slightly in the night wind. "Go back to your father's house. Tell him his son is innocent. Tell him you are a liar and a coward, or I will tell the entire village what I know of your character." The brother left, his footsteps heavy with something that looked almost like relief. That night, Akosua lay beside Kofi, listening to him breathe, feeling the warmth of his body. He did not reach for her. He did not thank her. He simply lay in the darkness, his eyes open, as if he were awake even as he slept. By morning, word had spread through the settlement of Kibwe. Akosua had defended Kofi against his own brother. She had stood between him and accusation with nothing but her conviction and her voice. The women at the market spoke of it with admiration. "Did you hear? She defended him with such courage. She saw the truth of his innocence." The elders gathered under the great tree and nodded approvingly. "That woman has the sight," they agreed. "She sees what others cannot. She knew he was innocent, and she spoke with power." Kofi's father, hearing the story, softened toward his son. The merchant brought gifts to their compound, cloths and oils, seeds for Akosua's garden, a new clay pot for their cooking fires. "You have a wise wife," he told Kofi. "Guard her carefully. A woman who will defend you so fiercely is rarer than gems." But in the weeks that followed, something shifted in their compound. Kofi became quieter. He would sit in the evenings without speaking. He would wake before dawn and leave on trading journeys that seemed to have no purpose. Once, Akosua followed him to the edge of the village and saw him meeting with a woman whose face was hidden by her wrapper. When he noticed Akosua watching, he did not look embarrassed or guilty. He simply looked tired. "Who is that woman?" Akosua asked when he returned. "A trader's daughter from the settlement of Umoja," he said. "We were discussing cloth trades." But Akosua's gift knew the difference between a lie spoken carelessly and a lie spoken carefully. This was the second kind. This was a lie that had been rehearsed, that had been prepared. The market women noticed something too. "Akosua's husband is not coming to her compound as often," they whispered while pounding yam. "Have you seen him? He walks through the village at strange hours." At the river, the women filling water pots spoke in lower voices. "He is seeing another woman, the one from Umoja, the trader's daughter with the soft hands. I have seen them together near the abandoned compound at the forest's edge." Akosua heard these whispers, and her gift told her they were true. But she said nothing. She continued weaving. She continued her work. She continued to be the woman people came to for answers, for wisdom, for the sight that could see through deception. One evening, Kofi brought her a gift, a new cloth from the settlement of Umoja, dyed with patterns she had never seen before. The colors were bright and expensive. "For you," he said, "for being patient with me during my business travels." Akosua looked at the cloth. She knew without knowing how she knew that he had bought this cloth for the other woman first. She knew that the other woman had rejected it, or that he had decided it was too dangerous to give it to her, so he had brought it home instead, as if honesty and evidence could be wrapped in expensive fabric. "Thank you," she said quietly, and she folded the cloth carefully and set it aside. That night, she lay awake, listening to Kofi sleep, and she understood something that made her heart contract like a fist. She had defended him so fiercely, so publicly, that to admit now that he was deceiving her would be to admit that her gift of sight was false. It would be to admit that she had made a terrible mistake. It would be to face the pity of all the women in the settlement of Kibwe, the ones who had praised her wisdom, the ones who had believed that she could see truth in people's hearts. She realized that she had trapped herself. By defending him so completely, she had made it impossible to leave him. At the market, the women began to notice her differently. "Akosua looks tired," one would whisper. "Have you seen the shadows under her eyes?" Another would nod. "Her husband travels constantly. Perhaps he is not as devoted as she claimed." The wives of the elders began to speak with calculated kindness. "You can tell us if something is wrong, Akosua. We are here for you." Oh, but their eyes held something that was not quite pity and not quite judgment. It was the satisfaction of women who had always known that Akosua's happiness would not last, that her choice had been foolish, that she would eventually understand what they had understood all along. Kofi's behavior grew more careless. He would return to the compound smelling of perfumed oils. His wrapper would have marks on it, stains from a woman's henned hands, evidence he did not bother to hide. When Akosua asked him directly about the woman from Umoja, he looked at her with something that was almost like contempt. "What do you care?" he said. "You are always working at your loom. You are always listening to other people's problems. You have not truly seen me in months." "I see you," Akosua whispered. "I have always seen you." "No," Kofi said, his voice sharp and final. "You see what you wanted to see. A sad man who needed saving, someone to make you feel wise and necessary. I was never who you thought I was, Akosua. I was never innocent of anything. I was just better at hiding the truth than my brother was." The words fell between them like stones into still water. "Then why did you marry me?" she asked. Kofi was quiet for a long moment. "Because you made it easy. You wanted to believe in me so badly that I did not have to work to deceive you. You defended me so fiercely in front of everyone that it became impossible for anyone to question me. You made my deception complete." He stood and wrapped his cloth more carefully. "I am going to the settlement of Umoja," he said. "I am taking the merchant's daughter as my second wife. My father has agreed. He says that a man of my status should have more than one wife. And you—" He paused, looking at her sitting on the mat, her hands folded in her lap, her loom abandoned. "You will stay here and pretend that you are still wise, that you still see clearly, that you made no mistake." He left that night. The elders came to Akosua's compound the next morning. They came with grave faces and careful words. "It is not your fault," they said, their voices heavy with pity. "A woman can do everything right and still lose a man to another's schemes." But Akosua could hear what they were not saying. They were saying that her sight was false. They were saying that she had been fooled. They were saying that the woman who was supposed to see through deception had been deceived most completely of all. The women at the market stopped asking for her counsel. When she approached the trading circles, they would smile tightly and turn away. At the river, when she came to gather water, the other women would already be leaving, their pots full, their business finished. They did not want to hear from someone whose judgment had failed so catastrophically. Akoshua's compound became a quiet place. She weaved, but the patterns her hands created had lost their meaning. She existed, but something inside her had stopped living the moment Kofi spoke those final words. The gift that had defined her, the ability to see truth in people's hearts, felt like a curse now. Because she had seen Kofi's truth all along, deep in the dark place where her gift lived, she had known. She had simply chosen not to acknowledge it. She had chosen to defend him anyway. She had chosen love over sight. And now the village whispered that she was mad or foolish or both. 3 cycles of the moon passed, and Akosua did not leave her compound. She did not go to the market. She did not go to the river. She sat with her loom, and her hands moved, but her heart was somewhere far away, in a place where she had never learned to see at all. It was on the evening of the new moon that the old woman came. Akosua did not hear her footsteps. She simply looked up from her weaving and found an ancient woman sitting across from her, though the entrance to the compound remained empty and untouched. The woman's skin was like leather that had been worked by 100 years of sun and rain. Her eyes were the color of clay, and when she looked at Akosua, it felt as if she were looking through her, seeing something that existed only in another world. "I have been watching you," the old woman said, and her voice sounded like wind moving through empty spaces. "I have been watching you since the night you chose deception over truth." Akosua's hands stilled on her loom. "Who are you?" "I am the keeper of what you have lost," the old woman said. "I am the one who gave your bloodline the gift of sight. 3 generations ago, your great-grandmother came to me broken, as you are broken now. She had defended a man falsely, and the village called her fool. She asked me for another gift, not the gift to see truth, but the gift to live with seeing it and choosing differently." "What gift was that?" Akosua asked. "The gift to see not just what is true," the old woman said, "but to understand why people choose lies. The gift to love not the person someone pretends to be, but the person they are becoming through their choices." The old woman leaned forward, and Akosua could smell earth on her, the smell of graves and roots and things that grow in darkness. "Your gift of sight was never false," the old woman continued. "You saw Kofi's deception from the beginning, but you chose to defend him anyway, not because you were foolish, but because you understood something deeper. You understood that a man capable of deception is also a man capable of change. You saw that his deception came from pain, from his need to be seen not as his family saw him, but as someone new." "But he never changed," Akosua whispered. "He became worse." "Yes," the old woman said, "because you allowed him to believe that deception would always be forgiven. You made his lies easy, just as he said. But that was not your failure. That was his choice." The old woman stood, and as she stood, the air around her seemed to shimmer. "Now you must choose again," she said. "You can remain here, believing that your gift is false, allowing the village to shame you into silence. Or you can understand that your gift is not the ability to see truth in others. Your gift is the ability to see truth in yourself." "What truth is that?" Akosua asked. "That you are not ashamed," the old woman said. "That you defended a man you loved, knowing that love required risk. That you chose faith over certainty, and that choice was not foolish, it was brave. The shame you feel is not your own. It belongs to those who whisper and judge, those who would never risk anything for another person." The old woman moved toward the entrance of the compound. As she walked, she seemed to fade, becoming less solid, as if she were made of smoke and intention rather than flesh and bone. "Your great-grandmother learned what I am teaching you," the old woman said. "She learned that real sight is not about seeing what others cannot. It is about seeing yourself clearly, even when the world tells you that you are blind." And then she was gone. Akosua sat alone in her compound, the lamp flickering beside her. For the first time since Kofi had left, she allowed herself to weep. But the tears that came were not tears of shame. They were tears of recognition. She cried for the foolishness of thinking that love should be safe, for the courage it had taken to defend him despite knowing the truth, for the innocence she had lost in believing that sight should be enough to protect her. The next morning, she washed her face in the river, and the women gathering water stopped their work to stare at her. Her eyes were clear, and there was something in her bearing that had changed. "Akosua," one of the older women said carefully, "we have been unkind to you. We blamed you for not seeing what we could not see. But now we understand." "Do not apologize," Akosua said, her voice steady. I did not see. Or rather, I saw and chose not to act on what I saw. That was my choice to make. At the market, she took her place among the traders, and people came to her as they always had, with problems, with questions, with needs. But this time, when she offered her counsel, she spoke differently. To a woman whose husband was growing distant, she said, "Your gift is not in knowing what he will do. Your gift is in deciding what you will do if he betrays you. Choose first, then love will find its true weight." To a young man afraid of his family's judgment, she said, "If you choose deception to please them, they will learn to believe your lies. If you choose truth, they may reject you, but at least you will know yourself." To a girl whose mother had warned her against marriage, she said, "Do not marry hoping to change him. Marry understanding that he will change, with or without you, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let him become who he must become, even if it is without you." The village began to speak of Akosua differently now. They said she was not just wise, she was real. She did not pretend to have answers she did not possess. She did not claim to see futures that could not be seen. She spoke from a place that had been broken and remade, and her words carried the weight of genuine understanding. 1 year after Kofi left, word came that he had returned to the settlement of Kibwe with his new wife, the merchant's daughter from Umoja. The girl was beautiful. Her skin was smooth, her hands were soft, her wrapper was made of the finest cloth. But her eyes held a constant anxiety, as if she were always waiting to be betrayed. Kofi himself had changed in ways that spoke to carelessness rather than growth. His clothes were expensive, but worn carelessly. His manner was confident, but hollow. He had gotten what he wanted, a woman of status, a marriage that pleased his father, and the getting of it seemed to have exhausted him completely. Akosua was at the market when she saw them. Kofi's new wife was examining cloth at one of the trading stalls, and Kofi was speaking to a young woman nearby, his voice carrying the same smooth honey that had once captivated Akosua. The new wife's hands clenched as she listened. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes darted toward her husband and away again, the motion of someone trying not to see something they already know. Akosua felt no triumph. She felt no anger. She simply felt a deep and abiding sadness for a woman who was about to learn what Akosua had learned, that a man who will deceive for you will deceive to you, and that knowing this truth is not the same as being able to bear it. Kofi looked up and saw Akosua watching him. For a moment, his confidence faltered. He looked away first. That evening, as the sun was setting, there came a sound from Kofi's new compound, a sound of something breaking, of voices raised in accusation. Word spread quickly through the village. The new wife had discovered that Kofi was keeping a third woman in the settlement of Umoja, and she had confronted him with such fury that he had struck her across the face. The women gathered at the river and spoke in hushed, angry voices. "She is a fool for defending him as Akosua did," one said. "She should have seen his nature from the beginning." But Akosua, listening quietly while gathering water, said nothing. She understood now what the old woman had tried to teach her. There was no shame in defending someone you loved, even if that person did not deserve the defense. The shame belonged only to those who betrayed trust. The shame belonged to Kofi, who had learned nothing, who had simply continued the pattern of deception with a new woman, and would continue it with every woman who came after. Within 2 cycles of the moon, Kofi's marriage had fractured completely. His new wife left him, returning to her father's house. She told everyone who would listen that she had mistaken cruelty for strength, that she had confused confidence with character. She spoke openly about her shame, about how she had defended him against her own doubts, and how that defense had cost her more than she could bear. The settlement of Kibwe watched as Kofi struggled. His father, now aging, reduced his access to the family business. The young women would no longer entertain his attention. He became the kind of man who sits alone at the palm wine bars, telling stories about how he had been wronged, how women had misunderstood him, how the world had been unfair. But no one believed him anymore. The elders gathered under the great tree and spoke of what they had witnessed. "Some gifts always come with a price," they said, looking at Akosua. The woman saw truly and defended boldly. She paid for her faith with loneliness, but she kept her soul intact. And the man, another elder said, shaking his head, sought to deceive and became trapped in his own lies. He is still alive, but he is no longer truly living. Mothers began to use Akosua's story as a teaching for their daughters. There was a woman, they would say, who defended a man she loved, even knowing that he deceived her. And because she did this, she learned something most women never understand, that love is not about seeing truth in others. Love is about seeing truth in yourself and choosing it anyway. The young women who heard this story began to come to Akosua, not with problems to solve, but with questions about themselves. They asked her about courage. They asked her about forgiveness. They asked her about the difference between hope and delusion. "How do you know the difference?" one girl asked her. Akosua thought about this carefully. "Hope is when you choose someone knowing they might fail you. Delusion is when you choose not to see that they will. I was never deluded about Kofi. I simply loved him more than I loved my own certainty." "Do you regret it?" the girl asked. Akosua looked at her hands, at the calluses that had never softened, at the fingers that had woven countless patterns. "No," she said finally. "I regret nothing. I would defend him again, knowing what I know now, because in defending him, I learned who I truly was. I learned that I am not a woman who sees clearly and keeps quiet. I am a woman who sees clearly and acts boldly, even in darkness, and that is worth any price." The settlement of Kibwe eventually learned to remember Akosua's story not as a cautionary tale about foolish women who love the wrong men, but as a story about a woman who loved so truly that it transformed her into someone stronger than she had been before. The deception that was meant to destroy her instead became the path to her becoming complete. Kofi, in the end, was the one who was destroyed, not by Akosua's defense of him, but by her refusal to remain broken by his betrayal. He had believed that lying was a tool he could use to shape his world. Instead, his lies became a prison of his own making, and he could see through the bars but could not find the door. And so the village learned that the woman who defended her deceiving husband was not a fool. She was a prophet in her own way. She had seen not just what Kofi was, but what he would become. She had chosen to love him anyway, and in that choice, she had discovered her true gift. It was not the gift to see what others cannot. It was the gift to choose what matters most, even when sight itself demands otherwise.